Lewis, we will move on from pro to college.
Mm-hmm.
And you've done some great reporting about North Carolina receiver Tez Walker and his eligibility. If you could quickly just walk us through where we're at, and it looks like this week we could very well get a decision on whether the NCAA will allow him to play during the 2023 season or not. I want to turn the floor over to you because, again, you've done some great reporting on this topic.
So there's the issue with a lot of NCAA, with a lot of the appeals and things like that, is there is not a set timeline, a set guideline. Like it is not, if you put in the appeal request here, you're going to hear an answer within 3 weeks. It's nothing like that. It varies. The research has to be done, all that kind of stuff. So really where things stand currently is where things have been standing. I know there was some reports that, I'm sorry, I apologize. I forget who specifically put this out there last week, towards the end of last week, that the UNC football coaching staff was, hopeful that things would work out and that we could be hearing something soon. That's where things have been since the waiver was put out there. And it's tough because for those of you, I know there's been a little bit of pushback regarding the Tez Walker situation. Some people are like, oh, of course UNC wants more from this, and of course they're going to be like, you hear a lot of different people, oh, what's different with this, eligibility concern than other eligibility concerns in the past, and blah blah blah. I think some of that just goes back to the fact that the NCAA, I really need the NCAA to get a hold of things. A lot of concerns can be said about the NCAA. I won't get into that right now. But with Tez's situation, right, it goes into the fact that you go all the way back to his high school years. He signs with ETSU, never makes it to campus because he tears his ACL and his signing is deferred. He eventually goes on to sign with NCCU, but NCCU never plays football that season because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So he transfers to Kent State. That is the argument that UNC is putting forward, is that he has truly only played for one other team, and that was Kent State. Also, part of what UNC is saying is that the NCAA has put forward, it was back in early January, saying, hey, we are going to really tap down on these two-time transfers. We don't want people essentially bopping from school to school to school like it's some kind of free agency. But they put forward that note, and Tez Walker had already enrolled at UNC 3 days to them putting forward this note. So, like, I don't know. It's one of those things where logically there's just not a whole lot of logic there that seems to make sense and apply. So what UNC football, what head coach Mack Brown has said is that they feel very good that when you lay the facts out, it just makes sense that Tez Walker would be given immediate eligibility. And he has emphasized a lot that he's like, hey, obviously we want him to play because this matters for our football team. He would be the number one receiver on the team. But he's like, it's more of what he is going through and the issues that he is having. Mack Brown has brought up a lot of the mental health concerns, saying that this is really impacting him, that he's just really kind of at a loss just in general because of a variety of different reasons. His grandmother's health, wanting to play in front of her. He's from the Charlotte area originally, so this would be like a playing in your backyard thing, with that Bank of America Stadium game, where they're playing South Carolina to start the season, the first Saturday in September. So really, there's not a whole lot of development in this situation. UNC remains optimistic that something will happen. But the main issue, the main concern is just the timeline. That's really what it boils down to, because at this point, they've had this in for several weeks now. And we are 2.5 weeks away, 2 weeks away from the start of the college football season. A little less than 2 weeks, actually. Yeah, because their first game will be the first Saturday in September. We're recording this as of August 21st. Yeah, and UNC will play South Carolina in Bank of America Stadium on September 2nd. So a little less than 2 weeks. Last time Mack Brown talked to the media, he said, that Tez Walker is still practicing with the ones. He's still practicing as if he will be eligible to play. So UNC has a good group of receivers to fall back on if Tez Walker is unable to play. Another transfer, and Nate McCollum would be a good one. You've got some experience with like Kobe Paysour. JJ Jones. There are plenty of like really solid receivers on UNC's team, but Tez Walker is someone who can elevate solid to great.
Yeah, let me hop in here, Lewis, because we talked some off the pod last week about all of this. And I understand that Tez Walker put up numbers at Kent State. And my meatball take was like, okay, I know this is at Kent State. I know he put up numbers there, but what about when he transfers to Power 5? You so kindly pointed out to me, you say, Mark, he's on the Blitnikoff Award preseason list at the receiver position. And for as excited as we are about Drake May and a potential Heisman campaign, what that potentially looks like if Tez Walker isn't granted the eligibility. I guess where I come down on this is this. It's like he never played for the first two schools he went to. And it's like, meanwhile, across the road in Raleigh, NC State has a seventh-year senior in Bradley Rosner at the receiver position. Now, I understand he hasn't had as many transfers, but it's like, I know it's not a totally apples to apples comparison, but it's like, if he's allowed to continue to play and if Walker put in his eligibility, his transfer to UNC before the NCAA changed its policy, wouldn't it abide by the previous policy and the old policy? That's kind of where I fall with all of that. And the big question you got to ask yourself, and you answered it pretty well, Lewis, is if he's deemed ineligible by the NCAA, what this offense looks like without him on the field, what that does for what we're expecting for a big, big season from Drake May and company from an offensive standpoint.
Well, and my thing too is you can't, I don't think it's right necessarily for the NCAA to change a rule and put that rule into place immediately when there are a lot of situations that, people have been in the process of figuring out where they're going, have said they're going to be transferring multiple times. I think personally, I think what the NCAA should have done is say, hey, we're going to tighten down on these two-time transfers starting at the end of this next transfer window, like starting at the end of spring football, because then you give people the opportunity to prepare accordingly. It's and because the whole thing is right. What the NCAA doesn't want to have happening is where you have a lot of people who are into the transfer portal who are looking for different positions, and they don't want to be spending the time to review each situation on a case-by-case basis. That's a lot of time and effort that has to be put into it. But I don't think that that's something you can get around because these are all different case-by-case situations. I don't know. I digress. I think it would be a shame, I think, if Tez Walker is not allowed to play this upcoming season. But I think, more than anything, the NCAA needs to kind of like come up with plans and stick with them. I understand it's a little bit of the Wild West right now. If I was a college athlete, it would be a very frustrating situation right now.
Let me say one other thing too, is if he projects to play in the NFL, even if it's just to have a cup of coffee, Lewis, that is life-changing money. Yeah. That's significantly more, considerably more for most athletes than an NIL deal, right? No. So we talked about, okay, the ramifications and the impact on Drake May and the offense this season. If he's not allowed to play, we don't know who the North Carolina Tar Heels quarterback is going to be in the 2024 season. We could guess, we could surmise, but if I'm Tez Walker and I want to showcase my ability to play for NFL scouts that will be at plenty of games in the 2023 season, I want Drake May as my quarterback, point blank, period.
I mean, no, it's huge. And I think if I'm like, that's why you have receivers who are coming here to play at UNC. And I think too, it's like I'm like 9 out of 10 situations, I am personally going to side with the, like, you look at the facts, and then if there's a bit of a toss-up, I go with the athlete just because, like, it's a person versus like a giant organization in the NCAA. I don't know, and I just, it's a huge. There are gonna be so many more eyes on Tez Walker if he were playing with Drake May as his quarterback, if he's the number one receiver for a guy who's on a Heisman conversation.
So you're going to potentially limit his ability to make money at the next level because look, like one of the big questions I have this year, and yes, you mentioned a lot of the receivers on the Tar Heels roster, but I don't want to shortchange what Josh Downs did a season ago and Antoine Green did in making Drake May for what we expect this season again, where he's on, Heisman preseason lists. Part of that is because of the play of his receivers from a season ago.
Yeah.
If Tez Walker helps with that transition for this season, those are the stakes of what we're talking about, Lewis.
Exactly. And that's one of the things that's brought up, right? Is if he has to sit out a year, he'd still have 2 years of eligibility. But once again, you don't UNC has had a really good stretch here where they went, Sam Howell to Drake May. There's no guarantee, just like with the Packers, right? They go from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers. There's no guarantee that Jordan Love is going to be the guy. There's no guarantee that, Connor Harrell or whoever that starting quarterback would be next year for UNC is going to be the guy. So you want to try and take advantage of your situation that you're in immediately.
I want to say one other thing too, and I want to go to the running back position for the Tar Heels really quickly, Lewis.
Sure.
We're 2 weeks away from kickoff. We're getting closer and closer to the season, which I can't wait for. British Brooks coming back for the Tar Heels. I know right now he's maybe second or third on the depth chart. I've seen this before with Mac Brown. Back in 2011, when I was a student at Mizzou, Henry Josie, who was the Big 12's leading rusher at the time, went on to have an NFL career, goes down for Missouri. And I'd never seen this before. Mac Brown, we were playing Texas, comes over from the opposing sidelines to check on the running back. Torn ACL, torn MCL, torn patellar tendon. Wished him good luck. 2 years later, Josie's back on the field in 2013, one of the SEC's leading rushers, and then he went on to have an NFL career. I'm not saying British Brooks is going to go on to the NFL, but when he gets his opportunity in his moment this season, he's going to show up for the Tar Heels, whether that's a special teams role, whether that's his opportunities to carry the football whenever he gets them in a crowded running back room. But I want to say this too. He was a player who represented the Tar Heels at the ACC kickoff a year ago. When he gets back onto the field, or maybe 2 years back, but it's going to be 611 days since he was last on a football field, Lewis.
Yeah.
When he gets his opportunity for the Tar Heels this season, keep your eye on British Brooks this season. I've seen this before. I am manifesting this now, and we're going to look back on this clip and be like, how did Mark know that? It's because I've seen it before with Mac Brown and his effect on saying, hey, we need to get this player back and someone who's a key member of this team a few seasons back. British Brooks, keep an eye on him, Lewis.
Oh, yeah. And that's something that Brown has said himself regarding the running back room in general. They have a lot of really good players, and they're going to identify, situationally who's good at what, and, assess it accordingly and put them forward. So, I think British Brooks is very loved in that locker room. And so it wouldn't surprise me to see him, play a solid role this year as long as he stays healthy. Yeah. And I know for everyone listening and watching, we have talked a lot about UNC football today, but remember, we are less than 2 weeks from the start of the season, right? Mm-hmm. NC State playing not this Thursday, but next Thursday. UNC playing not this Saturday, but next Saturday. And then Duke playing 2 weeks from today on Labor Day against Clemson. Next week on Triangle and Two, we're going to be talking a lot about all three teams, previewing everything. It's going to be a college football spectacular. Really excited for it. It's one of my favorite times of the year.
Cannot wait, Lewis.